Hey, good afternoon and happy fall equinox. I'm Quan Tracy Sherry and this is Tavish Cardiff. And we're representing and extremely excited about our raw material. It's a 12-week program. Pattern of thinking is what you called it?
That keeps coming up.
Okay, so just a mindset. You know, because in Western society, we really overthink a lot. I mean, we're taught to stay really caught into that left hemisphere, that side of the brain, the why of everything. And in that lower, and by lower, I don't mean worse than. You know, a lot of times we think lower chakras are somehow, we need all of it. And so the equinox is about the equal time between day and night. Now, the fall equinox is that we move into more darkness, which dark does not mean bad. Dark means the soul, our inner world, our inner motivations, our implicit biases. One thing I love to say about the soul is that paradoxically, it's our witness to whether our feelings, our thoughts, our behavior are congruent or incongruent, together or not together with our higher purposes, our higher plans. And then so it can live it in 2020 on September 22nd, but can also live in the future, and it can live in the past, and it can kind of be our guide or our mentor. Did you like the way I did that?
We did start with mentors. I was just gonna add, it's just kind of a blueprint.
Yes.
You know,
I like that.
We don't have a handbook on being human beings. However, maybe there is a plan. Maybe nature actually created a system that we could kind of think through, a pattern, if you will. And as we've kind of tested this, it's like Mentors Week seems to show up. I mean, what are we looking at this week in the news? Our justice, Supreme Court justice.
Yes.
So it just naturally falls with mentors. I mean, those are some of our highest mentors. So, you know, we're really looking at who we're going to look to for the future. I mean, this stuff just shows up naturally.
Yeah, because the Supreme Court, in theory, and sometimes in practice, they are to be the protectors of that other voice, that marginalized. So I would hope that our soul would be able to equalize or balance us between the judgment that tends to come from ego. Mm-hmm. And then the mercy and compassion is where we, at its highest level, we empathize. That our soul says, hey, there has to be something that is common between the two of us, or between us and an idea, or us and another group of people.
Yeah, the word common is really the basis for this work. Going through all sorts of other self-help books and all these methods and all these ways, and really pulling out just the basic information. And these 12 weeks of thinking pattern really lead you into yourself in a way that that has you constantly aware of yourself and measuring, like you were saying, those two sides. For these purposes, we call it soul energy and ego energy, and we're really balancing on a scale of each of those. So as we start the first week with mentors, the exercise involves creating a list of everyone who affected your thinking. Just, real quickly going through and jotting down the name or a description of the person, because sometimes you don't know the person that affected your thinking. But really being able to take a look, and as I've gone through this now for a couple of years, what shows up as mentor now is so different than what did then. My whole idea has been turned upside down of what a mentor is, because for the most part, the things that I remember that affect me weren't positive.
Okay. So you've been able to use the discerning part of your ego, because I want to make sure I heard what you said, to use the discerning part of your ego to understand, well, this might have been a negative experience from this mentor, but when you look at it through the eyes or the perspective of your soul, you get the kind of the fertilization or the of your growth, of your evolution. Because you made a statement when we first started this last year about how our parents are automatically our mentors, no matter whether you think about them that way,
whether they
or
were
not.
present in your life or
not. Yeah,
If
because
you
even their
didn't-
lack.
You didn't know your mom. You never met her. She died in childbirth. She's still a mentor.
So a lot of when I think about things have helped me in terms of being, they were mentorized, but I never met the person.
Well, and that's what's been interesting. That's what I was starting to get to.
Oh, okay.
Is as I have gone through this, I first started making a list and really noting the people and acknowledging what I got from them, what I didn't get from them, or what, where the lesson was instead, and what I gained from the situation, transforming that. Then I started looking to things like books and movies and actors and people I don't know who said something in an article.
Yeah, because I wouldn't have thought about the scrolls of the Supreme Court.
So you have all the rest of this mentorized. It's almost like, because a lot of my coming, what I think, besides being one of former Jehovah's Witnesses, most of those are spiritual. I mean, they came from books.
Yes.
They came from poetry. They came from movies. They came from songs. They came from all of that. But they don't necessarily locate themselves in a person per se. But
and that is what you will find as you start working with just this concept in your head. And that's why each of these weeks are specifically the way that they are. They've shown up this way because you go back in with a deeper understanding every time.
Right.
And I'd make the argument that you as a writer, artist, that you would have a much more expansive or active inner world of the patterns of energy, also known as archetypes if we're using a Jungian psychology. So you wouldn't necessarily be enamored with the human beings. As an artist, you would be enamored with the beauty of, the perspective of. Because I love if we're talking about a statement that mentors, that I would see that would be in the I Ching, the Book of Changes, this hexagram number 59, that says the social responsibility of all artists is to reunite people with their reality. And so I see our raw materials, mentors, and then we go to music and food and then ignorance in week 4 as what is our reality? What's the reality that we're dealing with inside?
Right.
And then what are the collective realities that we're creating, and how do we balance both?
And once you start really looking at yourself and tearing that apart and figuring out why you feel the way you do, why you think the way you do, why you react the way you do, then you can have more room to understand that stuff for other people and to wonder why. It just hit me too, Paris Hilton in the news this week with a video about abuse and about the things that she suffered. And when you're talking mentor, she's the original influencer.
Yeah, selfie.
She did all of that, and now she's coming out this week, mentor time, or in the last couple weeks at least, right leading up to this, with this idea that I think she says at one point, I helped create a monster. And the ego.
And that's that selfie influencer.
Well, it's how much time of the day do you spend worried about something like that? She says something in there about, there are people that can't look at themselves in their phone without putting a filter on to look at. It's just, how much do we hide of what we truly are? And by week 12, we start with mentors, we end with wholeness. And in between there are several steps that we go through just to evaluate ourselves, to understand our material, where we come from, and how everything that we've gone through really fits who we are, when we can take ownership of all of those things instead of feeling shame and instead of feeling, negative feelings and not wanting to look at them. And that's what I think with her, she said she had spent all of her life just moving forward, and she had never looked back and made the connections of why some of the things that she's doing. And so in this, she really goes into, why did I do that? Why did I need all of that attention?
Because just imagine someone who's 16 or 18 years old, when they came of age, there was interconnectedness, smartphone, you record all of your experience.
This has been the life, yeah.
And when speaking of filters, I'm very well aware of which filter darkens me, that makes my skin looks more, saturates my skin color. I think it's Juno, if that's the one, on Instagram. And but I'm aware of that, so we can, and I don't know any, or I bet there are very few black people who don't have a relationship to race as mental, as understanding not only black to white or black to brown or black to red, but also the colorism that comes into our race, whether you're black or Latin or...
Well, I could add something to that. I'm the no generation,
You're
the silent generation.
You're the silent generation. Yeah, you're on
But-
that cusp of silent to moving to boomer.
Right. So
Yeah.
if you read, you can tell a person, if you read text from that, and I think you could probably do it in all of them, depending on what was happening at the time. Because when Black Was Beautiful came out, see, that was a whole different, that was a shift. Because we would never use black. We would never call anybody black. That was negative. So when the 60s rolled around, that's how you describe it. But now you don't call in the word Negro. See, all of that's in there. And so what you get is you can tell the generation by the descriptors that writers use often.
When Negro just means black in Spanish.
I know. And I know, but what you get is generally, if the Negro is tossed around now, first of all, we don't like it coming out of white people, period. Not now. Okay, so what happens is, but when we're joking with each other, it's always, Negro, really?
Yeah,
really?
sure.
So it's that kind of thing. It depends. And so you have to be, but you can tell generationally, often, if you're reading something, or the kind of language that people use. That's just the way.
I'm doing this presentation tomorrow on economics, and so I've had to go over the history of America before the Revolutionary War in the 18th century, and then before the Civil War in the 19th, and then before World War II. And these 84-year cycles, basically, and I'm talking about the planet Uranus, and Uranus is where the Henry David Thoreau, hearing the different drum beat, being individualized from the collective, thinking for oneself and one subculture. And I would make the argument that a really good mentor would be someone who would challenge your thinking, either through actual challenging it or through their behavior made you think differently about why you did what you did or do what you do. And then they would also have a Saturnian, that they would have some place where there was status, where there was a kind of, I've disciplined myself to either present this unusual message or unusual way of teaching, but I've also keep the freedom of my thoughts, keep the freedom to be the individual. And I think that if you don't come from your soul, if you don't have the capacity, because I think the soul is I feel the soul is the part of our being that gets us to pause. But the point is that the soul is where it has room for all of that. And the ego, I feel, is where we can communicate it, that we can give words to it. But American culture and Western society has gone too far in terms of ego and attachment to ego.
I think you could really, human beings
Period.
I mean, you can say human beings, but we are the pinnacle in America. We have elected our ego as our president. I mean, that
in the guise of an internet troll.
If there's a single symbol of ego in our country, it's Donald Trump.
And just a quick, his instinctive self-image part of himself, which is represented by the moon, because the moon is where you're born into a certain body, you're born into a certain class, you're born into certain immutable characteristics, and the moon is where we just kind of absorb all of that, and we respond to life, or we react to life via those symbols or those principles. So he has that energy on the South Node, which means this is a collective of his lifetime. It's not the first lifetime that he's operated in this kind of, I know better than you. It's a eugenic even kind of connection. You know, my race, mine is better than yours. I'm superior.
And I also will, as much as I'm not a fan, I will offer that he's a great example of the law of attraction. And up until these last couple of years, when we've experienced this real shift, I mean, an actual shift in January, but real shift heading away from ego and into soul, just the tiniest little righting of the ship. And that's when he's had these realizations that if he says something, it doesn't come true. There's energy against it right now. But up until this point in his life, everything he wanted happened, and he is a perfect example of manifesting. I mean, he's
and supposedly he was a member, or his father would take him to the church that was connected to Norman Vincent Peale, the power of positive thinking. That there was that if there was any kind of spiritual edification, it was from that school of thought from back in the middle of last century.
So when you're looking at a soul scale and an ego scale, he's at the egoiest end of ego, and he's at the egoiest end of soul, right? He's tipping the scales both ways. And he's that energy, and that is the energy that I think is just crashing right now.
Yeah, because we have to, I mean, if we just use the metaphor, take out all of, where this virus started and what it means for our civil liberties. And I mean, and granted, I can have that discussion, but the point of our raw materials in this 12-week is for you to personally pause. And so a collateral benefit of this pandemic has been, even by staying inside, it's like, where's your turtle? Where's your snail? How do you carry your home with you wherever you go, even if you have to stay in your home? And the home is a metaphor or an extension of our souls, of our ability to recognize who we are inside. Because when we're in our home, hopefully you live with people that you don't have to construct these elaborate, egocentric.
Well, hopefully, but I think people do.
I think they do.
I mean, I think, but I like that idea of carrying the whole home.
Yeah.
Because that's your wholeness.
That's your home, exactly.
It's all of you. It's all the parts of you. And if you can't open your home up to the people that you care about, or I mean, really just to anybody.
Well, there has been an uptick in domestic violence. I mean, so I'm not saying that, but it's, and for what I understand, looking at planetary evolution, so how planets evolve, that the Earth is at that point. You've got the extreme ego, attachment to the outer world, and then the soul is like, oh no, you have to return to your source, that interconnectedness, and so that shift from outer use of the resources, Louisiana Purchase, American Dream, Manifest Destiny, West expansionism, to inner work. So the difficulty in the planet individually is you got to do your inner work. And it's called inner work for a reason, or your soul work for a reason. Only you know it. we can feel the effects. We can maybe see some effects, but if it's not authentic, we're gonna go like, oh, it's just performance art or performance activism. It's not real, you know.
And I think in this work, that's what it brings you down to, is takes you into yourself and makes you really take stock of your whole house, what you are working with, and it sets up a structure that allows you to filter your thoughts in a way that's productive, and to organize your time in a way that's productive, and just really sets every foot on the path that is towards something beneficial.
And I don't think this is the only panacea. I don't think this is the only cure of this. I just think what our raw material is doing or wants to do is give you your own internal guide, you know, your own internal sense of self-sufficiency on a physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual level. And that's not necessarily the order the weeks go in. It starts emotionally, mentors.
Spiritual.
Then spiritual for music. And then the third week is food, which is mental. And then physical is the ignorance. So how all of this manifests. And that's just the 4 weeks. I mean, so 1/3 of it. And I feel that the beauty of just the tipping, you know, I feel like I've just gotten 1 foot in the water on this system, and you know, sometimes it's the right, sometimes it's the left, but it's just 1 foot. 2 feet ain't been in the water yet. They just haven't. And because when I think about mentors, you said something about the Supreme Court, and I'm a lawyer, and I didn't think of the Supreme Court as a mentor of mine. But now I'm going to be thinking about and pondering that more, and then we go into the Aquarius age, which is what this is. The Aquarius age basically says, what do you know about yourself? How do you appear in groups? How can you be transparent about who you are? And it's not about a tolerance. I don't want you to tolerate. It's about coexistence. Yeah, and you can only get to coexistence if you're actually engaging, if you're actually having the more difficult discussion. A major goal of our soul is to place us into situations so we evolve, so that we grow.
So we can even look at the pandemic from a mentor perspective.
Yes.
And what we've each done with it. I mean, you said it's easy to not find distractions at home. I can just think of a handful of people who have done that, and that's what they've come to me for energy work for.
Yes.
So, you look at every person and you're going to see a completely different set of circumstances.
Yes.
And just
but it's like a "therefore the grace of God go I." I mean, that statement brings you into your soul, or is one of the statements. But I didn't mean to interrupt.
So many things do. I was just, boiling down mentors for a second, and I told you this story before, but I'll just say it here. I was standing in Powell Bookstore last fall in Oregon, and I was looking at all these books now, all these authors, and all these incredibly respected people who did so much work, and I sat there and realized the common things out of each of those books, without having to pick them all up, is get enough water, breathe, get to know yourself. And everybody gives you a way, through their own study and ego. They want to share their way because it worked for them. Mm-hmm. But if this information can fit on a postcard, rather than you need to read an entire book.
And I love index cards.
You said I don't know that this is for everyone. I mean, I'm not sure everyone wants to do it, but I think every single human being, period, could benefit from.
So this water, breath, and alignment is not about you have to do some ideal, perfect anything, but you do want to be aware of your breath, aware of the in and the out,
the more you are aware. I mean, breathing is an involuntary action. We do it. Mm-hmm. But if you actually pay attention, if you move breath and direct it through your body, as you know from yoga, then you get a whole different effect. Everything can feel differently. If you spend time breathing into an injury, it will heal more quickly than if you just think that you want it healed. I I mean, there's effort and intention that goes into breath in the body and our ability to heal. Water, breath, and alignment water, breath, and alignment are things that we recommend for this program. And alignment can mean so many different things,
hell yeah.
which is why it's in there like that. But the most simple of those, if we break it down to the least common denominator,
our raw material
is, so if yoga is a lot of stretching, pandiculation is kind of the opposite of a stretch, where you're, like an animal or a baby, you know, when they wake up, they do that full body stretch where they tighten a muscle, and tightening it and holding it in that tightened space and then feeling the full release, that's a pandiculation. So pandiculating your body is something that you can do all day, every day. You know, I've done it while I've been sitting here talking. And if you remember to do that, just like you remember to breathe, then you're putting actual energy into it and it works more effectively. So the more we practice any of these things, you know, the deeper connection we have to ourselves, and then the bigger capacity to understand the people around us, especially the ones that aren't in touch with that stuff right now.
And those that are not in touch can also be our mentors.
Oh yeah.
Because they will reflect, are we reacting to them or are we responding to them? Because you know you're over it karmically if you're neutral. If you're eating Swiss chocolate, you know, because they were known for their neutrality, there's no karma when you're neutral. And I know, like I said, my one foot that's been in this water breath alignment over the past year, I've been, particularly when I'm out in the world, where I know unconscious people, they're unconscious, so they're not aware of, what is it, forgive them, Father, they know not what they do, or whatever that scripture is. They don't really know, and it's not in this kind of like, I'm better than, because if anything, when you're more aware, you have less excuses. You no longer can just say, I did not know. You can say, I chose not to behave well. But, you know,
that's what you come up with, I
chose not to behave well. Yeah, I'm acting out right now.
That's a conversation for ignorance week.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah, come back in 4 weeks. Yes.
I'm behaving badly in a group. That would be wonderful.
Let's leave it with, in order to, you know, truly accept your wholeness, which by the end of 12 weeks we'll be ready to look at that.
So gather up your relationship to your mentors, people who've taught you through example.
It is really good if you write them down. And
Yes.
on our website, ourrawmaterial.com, there are exercises and some meditations that we did last year on the trial. They're good, they're raw. Do them if you want. Don't do the exercises if you want. It's kind of fun to write it down though, because you can go back and look, and you know, sometimes I just run across mentor lists that I write every once in a while. Just really good for your brain.
And if you write them, then you're sending a stronger intention. If you light incense, or if you light a votive candle, or whatever, you automatically, when you do those little things, you're telling your subconscious, oh, I want to move into more of a non-ordinary space or a magical space. I want to relax my ego constraints so I can let more of my essence or my soul come through. I'm excited.
Have an intention. Yep, I'm excited too. I really am. Cherry, you?
Well, I'm learning. This is, you know, yes, I am. Yes, I am.
Hell yes.
But you always think you kind of know stuff, and then when you guys start talking, I go like, oh my God.
There's always more to know.
Yeah, there's always more to know. That's exactly.
There's always more to know.
Right.